Hello everybody, Michael here. So I'm almost finished with this gunstock and I realize that I've gone all the way through the finished levels of oiling without sharing any of that with you all. And I'm not quite done, so I thought I'd take this opportunity to just show you a little bit about what I'm doing at this level. But before we get into it, just take a look here at this beautiful piece of wood. Now that the finish is really coming on, isn't that amazing? I'll take you outside at some point and do this in sunlight and get some DSLR photos. But once the grain is largely filled with oil, whoops, that's just the oil bottle, it just really, the figure of the wood just really starts to pop. Here's the other side. This piece of wood, the near side is the prettier side, I mean. Usually when we look at the highest dollar wood, the off side, the presentation side, the side that other people see while you're shooting the gun, is the side that, you know, we want to have the higher color and figure, and that's what commands the higher price in a blank. But personally, I don't do this to show off to other people how cool my wood is. I want to enjoy it. I'd rather it be on the near side. So when I take it down off from my face and I'm looking at it, or I'm sitting there getting ready for a shot, or I'm, you know, if it's a hunting gun, if I'm sitting there for hours watching wildlife go by and nothing that I can shoot, that's California hunting for you. I have this to admire. So frankly, I prefer to have the nice side of the wood on my side. All right. So anyway, enough ogling. Is that what Google's short for? Go ogle the web. I was wondered about that. All right, so you can see that I am not working in a particularly dust-free environment. I've got this 2x6 set up on the miter saw. Everything else is just covered with dust or covered with projects. I got a 24-foot long, 4-foot wide table to build yet along one wall of the shop. That's going to be the wing table for the airplane. But it also would just be hugely valuable to have more space to lay out projects and work on. So I'm still a little cramped in the new shop. It is what it is, but I can make these comments. One is, so long as I'm not doing anything to put dust in the air, I'm not particularly worried about dust settling onto this wet finish. Additionally, every half a dozen, maybe 8 coats of rubbed in oil, I shouldn't even use that language, it's not really rubbed in like the oil is getting in through the act of rubbing, it gets in through capillary action. Anyway, my point is that every half a dozen or 8 coats of oil, I sand it back down to the level of the wood, so if there's any dust that got in the finish, it doesn't matter, it gets sanded off anyway. There are a few areas here where traditionally issues start like to develop little tight curves here. Oil tends to build up in there thicker. For some reason, dust likes to seem to get attracted to those wet areas, so I can feel in here, I can barely see it. There's a little bit of dust that's got into the most recent layers of finish right up in here. The rest of it looks really good. There's one or other two little spot, but I'm going to do a final sand down of this here, maybe another half a dozen coats of oil. The thing is, every time I think it's done and do the final sanding and then go put oil on, it's like, oh dang, it's not really done. There's still some pockets showing. This is really very close to being like perfectly filled, but I bet I got 10 or 20 to go. Anyway, enough rambling. So I cut Scott blue shop towel, which are fairly lint free, and cut one sheet into fourths. And then maybe this is a little overkill. I mean, here I am working on top of a miter saw, right? How worried am I really about dust? Nonetheless, I have some concern that maybe the edges of the paper can shed fabric, especially like the perforated edge. It's already kind of fuzzy. So I go along and I fold in each, make sure you're seeing me, each edge, fold it in like that, fold this in like that, and then fold it in half. And now I have no exposed cut edges to do the oiling with. So, you know, most of the years I've been doing this, which is most of my life, I just use the oil as it comes out of the can. It's kind of handy because you can put the paper towel over the top of the oil, the spout, tip the whole thing over to get some oil on the paper towel, tip it back over again, set it down all with one hand while the other hand is holding it onto the stock. The last few stocks, though, I've been using these plastic bottles. You can squeeze all the air out of them, and I think it helps the oil last longer, keep it from thickening. The last bottle, I added glass marbles, which I've done before in jars, you know, to remove the air, excess air. It didn't work out so well in the squeeze bottle because there ended up being a lot of air mixed in with the marbles. I couldn't get it all out, but at the same time, this way, at some point when I reach a lower level, and I'm going to be able to squeeze all the air out. I guess what it comes down to is there's going to be waste of material no matter what method you use of storing the oil and applying it. But this is a pretty handy way of dispensing it. So I've been liking this because I can dispense just how much I want. So what I do here is just rub it on. Now remember, we're not trying to rub it into the wood. You'll read articles online saying that you should do this with bare skin because it warms the oil and helps rub it into the wood. At this stage of the game, the pores are almost completely filled and it doesn't matter. Earlier on in the process, while the pores are still open, capillary action draws the thin oil into the wood, and rubbing it on by hand or heating it up with your hand isn't going to do anything. If anything, heating it up probably slows the process of the stuff getting in because it thickens so quickly. So anyway, that's what I do. My goal here is to make the surface visibly wet with no oil left on top. That, you know, not to call it a run would be to go too far. I don't want any thick areas of oil at all because it's just going to end up with a ton of time sanding it off later. It's going to be all gooey and form corns in the sandpaper. So my goal here is just to make it a smooth, slightly damp. That's why it takes 40, 50 coats, not 40, it's really 50 or more, I would say, to have a fully filled surface. Over the years, I've tried different methods to speed the process. Of course, everybody's familiar with the idea of doing this with sandpaper, thereby creating sanding dust of the wood that mixes with the oil and fills the pores faster than just thin oil. And I don't think it particularly saves any time, but what it does do is it mixes a different color sawdust into pores that are a different color than that dust was. And you end up with a very speckled appearance because the grain everywhere is going to be filled with something that's not clear. It's going to be colored. I do not think that is a good idea. Now I have also used, and with very porous wood, I think this has some potential validity, is to use thixotropic, if I can pronounce that right, thixotropic silica, commonly sold under the brand name Cavasil, which I understand is the thickening agent they use in McDonald's milkshakes, but mainly I use it in composites work. We all do use it in composites work to thicken epoxy. But when it's mixed in with the liquid, it actually becomes invisible. It doesn't add any color to it. So I have done that with finishes. Mix the finish in oil with Cavasil and rub it into the wood. Of course, then you got to do a pretty significant sanding off because it's so thick, and the net result of time and appearance, I just don't think it offers any value. Nothing like just using clear, I mean, relatively clear, but just, you know, oil. And just patience. And it doesn't take that long. The first coats take a few days, you know, the first coat, maybe it'd take a day or two, you know, in a warm room you could do it in a day to dry because it's deep in the wood and it's going to take a while to outgas and cure. But then as you go up to the later levels, this is, I think, the fourth one I've done today, it's going to be dry and ready to do another coat in, you know, maybe a half hour or less because it's just sitting on top of the surface now. Very easily outgasses and cures. Now, if you see a spot that you'd like to go back and work on, and it's like, oh man, it's sticky, and it just, you probably can't see in the camera, but it just turned all foggy looking because the stuff is already sticky and trying to cure, no big deal. Just add another little bit of oil. and just soften that whole area up and go over it again, and then leave it alone. You know, unless it's got wetness, right? If it's got wetness, you're going to have to do something about it, because otherwise you're going to sand it later. And it's always more work to sand. All right, so basically that's all I had this time. I just wanted to make sure I got some notes out there on YouTube about how I fold the paper towel, and you know, the thought process that's going on at this point of the finishing. And I would say in a few days, you know, certainly sometime next week, we ought to be doing the final photos. I can't wait. The client's just going to be so happy with this. It's just such a spectacular piece of wood, and a really nice ergonomic shape. The stock has minimal drop, so it's going to be very comfortable to shoot. The recoil is going to come straight back into the shoulder. What I find with this is for the Beeman R1, or really it's the Viro HW80. That's a big gun. It's got a lot of recoil. And as you all know, with spring guns, the gun is recoiling before the pellet leaves the barrel. And so if the recoil is operating through a big angle of a significantly dropped stock, then the recoil is gonna make the gun tip up like this before the pellet's even left. And with it being recoiling straight into the shoulder like this, you'll be able to watch, well, this guy will be able to watch the pellet fly through the air through the scope. Sometimes, I mean, it is a break barrel spring gun, right? There's a lot of recoil going on. But pretty regularly, you'll see the pellet fly through the scope, and it's like, wow, it's like a PCP with all-day power, as long as you can crank that handle. All right, everybody, that's all I got. Bye.